But it was for me after all these years of working in the field of family violence prevention. It would have to be one word: silence.
Yeah,
The silence is deafening. The silence in the various ways
yeah,
that we silence our voices from the beginning, and the guilt, the shame, all of that good
mm,
stuff that therapists love to look at. It's
mm,
glaringly obvious after a while. And then we ask, oh, why are they taking their lives? Why are they drinking? Why are they so bad? Yeah, so it's a silence. It's just, I'm laughing because Megan, you're always so ahead of things by speaking up. Many of us would just sit and listen to the
yeah,
broken static, and that's an example of us taking so long. Should I say it? Is something
mm,
wrong? What if I open my mouth and say there's static? I can't hear you. Sorry, Moana. But
yeah.
that's the kind of yeah. That for me, it's a silence. How do we break that?
Well,
Yeah, that's a challenge.
yeah, and that cultural silence has always been there and
Yeah.
across the Pacific. But if you think of how you grew up, right? I
Mm.
mean, if you grew up in a family where you never sat around and talked about issues,
Yeah.
because your mom or dad will say, "Yeah, don't talk about that anymore," or you just didn't talk about it because it was taboo. As an adult, then when somebody asks you if you're okay, you're going to be that person that says, "Yeah, yeah, I'm all right," and you become a people pleaser, right? Because you never sat around the table and talked about it. And this is talking about our generation, but it's gone on to the next generation, right? And yet we are the parents of this next generation. So why is that silence still there? Are we not talking to the kids? And it's really about, what Megan said. It is about changing that. And it's really, you're right. It's hard, because even in the NGOs where we have expats and others, when we have our workshops on counseling and looking at preventative things, when we come up and start talking about issues of sexuality, of personal boundaries, things, you can feel it in the room. Isamoa, people are shouting that oh my gosh, are they talking about drug use and things like that? And so sometimes, and this is very early on when I was in Samoa, I hear people say, there's Moana again talking about issues. The reason we're getting violence because you keep talking about it. But, I just kept talking about it. And, others, I said to them, keep talking about it. Because when you talk, what's happening in Samoa now, and we even bring in the pastoral community, these whaiwhiao, because two of my brothers are whaiwhiao, and we're talking
Uh-huh.
about it. And it's so out there now, Samoa, the domestic violence and the gender violence and the alcohol and drugs, mental health. It's like those ones that aren't talking are starting to come out now, even though they
Great.
still feel uncomfortable talking about it. We're saying, or like I'm saying to these parents, you are in denial if you think that nothing is going on with your child. They are self-harming.
Mm.
And it's not just looking for attention. They don't know how to
No.
verbalize it. And so they are harming themselves. And often when I'm
Mm.
working with students, it's like their parents don't want to meet me. They don't want to meet me, and they don't like it that their kids are seeing me. But I don't stop there. I'm like, I'm talking to them, and I'm saying it's not about blame. We need to find ways to work with them so that they can share their voice, and so they're not self-harming by having unprotected sex, by using drugs and stuff. And so it's just making our voice louder and using all of these social platforms to make it, because a lot of it is, and I'm the last person to run down our culture, especially when you're doing presentations. Well, if we can't go, as soon as you say something against the culture, they said, yeah, right, nothing. She's putting down our culture. And so I'm very careful when I do presentations, because it's not about that. But we have some processes, ikako culture, that contributes to the reasons why these kids are, because, when we're when I was little, my
Definitely.
grandmother, she was like a counselor, and I'm the naughty black sheep. So when she's calling me, I know exactly the tone of her voice, which voice I'm going to be in trouble, which voice come and eat, which voice to do that. And so we had nonverbal communication. The generation now, it's like they have to have that verbal, and and plus I knew exactly, and cognitively I knew what's going to happen to me if I don't do the dishes, or if I don't do I was you knew straight away. You didn't dare, try to push that boundary. But now it's like they're pushing boundaries. But these kids are showing their pain through using drugs and through using other types of self-harm. And so when we're listening to them as a coach, it's not about it's not about you fixing them, but it's allowing them that space, holding that space for them, and allowing them
Yeah.
to talk, so that you can get some resolve out of it. Because it is a lot of it, and it's very hard when you're working in Samoa, because Samoa very, very, and there's people there that don't even like the fact that we have a family violence court and an alcohol and drugs. They'll say, alcoholic Samoa. But, there's some very high functioning drinkers in Samoa. The only reason they don't meet the DSM-5 criteria is because they never miss a day of work. But they still they still go to work.
Functioning, high functioning.
Yeah, and so I always, when the judges, when they tease me and they say, alcoholic, I say, yeah, well, high functioning, go. I'm always trying to tease. But when I said to them, these kids, we have to find a way to say to them, okay, if when they say that they're okay drinking as much as they do binging, like, do they actually understand the physical harm they're doing to their bodies? Because when I talk to youth and I say to them, do you know what major organs in your body are affected every time you binge drink like that? They go, oh no, I'm all right. I just woke up with a headache. I said, because your brain is dehydrated. Your undeveloped brain is dehydrated. I said, your kidneys, your heart, your liver. And so physically you're affected. Financially, whose money are you drinking on? So it's all of those, because they think they're okay. They can drink, and their parents, let them drink. But it's the harm, and it's the hazardous drinking, it's the irresponsible drinking, and and also that learned behavior. When you're around family that are constantly drinking, well, of course you're going to end up being a drinker yourself. And it's like, part of coaching, what I like about coaching is listening to their story. Because if you think about all the training we've had in psychology, counseling, mefapinga, it's all these models. But if you think about our culture and your relationship with your, let's say, your grandmother or your mother, it was always a narrative. It's about the story. Because they'll say, and you're like, oh. But it's that narrative therapy, that narrative counseling is what works for our people, because they'll come and tell you their story. And when you're working and coaching like counseling, you have to try to break that barrier of fear, because typically when they're talking to you, they and like children, when they lie, it's because of fear, right? Just like adults. And so usually when I've listened to them tell me a whole bunch of lies, and then I go back and say, yeah, lie, and try to kind of calm them and say, and reasons why they need to tell me the truth. I don't want to say, that's like a threat, right? Sometimes I want to say that, but mostly it's like, I think to myself, how am I going to calm them and make them feel safe? Talking to me and opening up and holding space for them, so they can talk about the shame and they can talk about the fear, especially with youth, because they have trust issues, they have trauma, and trauma, we know, is what is going on in their head, what they're telling, the story that's in their head. And how do we, as counselors and coaches, help them to change that story so that it's not harmful anymore? You know, for example, have any of you seen Tofinga, the Laughing Samoan? When you hear his stories, the whole room laughs, and a lot of what he's talking about is abuse. Whamangakume, when you used to do lokameki, and your mum would be sitting there with all of her facials threatening you non-verbally, and the reason we laugh about it is because we're not emotionally attached to it anymore. It's like we're on the outside looking in, because we're like, oh yeah, I remember that. Okay, manga kua oka le fasingo. But it's because we've detached ourselves emotionally, so we can laugh about it now. But it's like, when you haven't healed emotionally from that, you're not laughing. And so it's like, what I love about the coaching, it's allowing that person to talk, and the space is mostly that person talking and you listening and using their words to, when, like, one woman, when her trauma is her relationship with her mother, and so she has these three daughters, and she pours everything into her daughters, to the point where to me, they're just the most ungrateful children on the face of the earth. But she doesn't see that because they're her children. And so she was talking about her obligation, ilang whāngau. And I said, what's your obligation to you? And you know what? She just started crying. She's never asked herself that. I said, what? Women typically, they will just keep going and going and going and going until they can't go anymore. And they do everything, and then they go home, and when the family and the kids are asleep, they're drinking themselves drunk, because they don't want to show people they're in pain. And with Samoan women specifically, you've got to be that strong woman. I mean, even if your husband is not performing, or if your kids are, it's always about the woman, and so you just have to be even more stronger. But it's like, that shouldn't be the case. And these conversations, I think, in one of the workshops we did in Iubolu, and we had it at the university, and we were talking about using creativeness to talk about your trauma. And we had it in, I don't know if you've been to the university, the big fella Samoa there. And, we had like 7 kids come that wrote poetry, one did a song. But while they were talking, all these kids came and stood around outside, and then ended up coming in and started sharing. They wanted to come up and share their story. And we were quite surprised. Of course, we had to run around and get more food, because we didn't realize all these kids. It ended up being like 200 kids there. And what was really good about that, what we have, because I have trained a peer mentoring group at Iole University. And so they were all walking around with these T-shirts and the only thing I had on the T-shirt was "Talk to me." And these kids started talking, and it was really interesting, because I have done coaching with them. But I always say to them, if they're talking to you about suicidal thoughts, and that comes to me, you got to make sure that they're okay, as mentors, and coaching, that they're not doing things outside of their capability. But it's like, I always say to them, think of it in a cultural context. Like the way the youth are now with the World Wide Web, they are stuck between these two worlds. They want this. Imagine a kid in Samoa living in a whale with his family on his phone, watching how kids live in New Zealand or Australia, and wanting that. And it's like, the sad thing is, you always see these kids are on their phones. But we went out to drop off one of these kids to their place out Ikuai, Falealili. I don't know if you know where that is in Samoa. It's out Kauai, so we went for a ride. And it was about 9 o'clock at night by the time we got there. And we saw these kids in the front, still outside, just running around, no phones, But before we got to Falealili, we'll see kids sitting on the street. You can just see the light of their phones sitting there. No one's talking. But when we're going out Kauai, it's like they're still playing games, and we can hear the Lomako said, "Oh my God, but they were playing with each other. There was no phones, and probably because the network is bad out there anyway. because we were saying to the Lomakua, we feel a video, well, go, we're trying to ring. And she said, we go network. And she was saying to us, can we go and talk to Fiame and tell her to tell the EPC, you know, but it's like, these are and coaching, they are conversations with a purpose. And when you put your cultural eye onto that, it's even, that's another layer of wellness, because, you know, anything cultural that you look at with Western eyes, you're never going to get a resolution. And people can say, they'll, you know, it's like they're talking about Margaret Mead now, you know, when she, and they'll say, you know what, your culture is chauvinist, or but it's because they don't understand. It's like, you know, some people will say about, they say inequality, how come that women can't have matai? And I'm saying to this non-Samoan, I said, but she's married to a Samoan. I said, listen, there is Samoan, there is culture, and there is customs. Every village have their own customs. And this, if their custom is women don't have matai, that belongs to that village. It's different from the culture, you know, so it's, and it's not about inequality or like, or custom, you know, and it's like, when you look at things with your cultural eye and try to understand from that perspective, even though these kids are being brought up with this Western mentality, you know, because when they say to me, when I asked this Samoan kid in Australia, oh, where do you come from? Oh, I'm Australian. Faku, what's your ethnicity? For my Australian. So I said to him, can you go stand next to that Balangi kid over there? And I'm going to ask the guard, which one of you is Australian? and you know, because you look Samoan, you know, and it's when they don't know where they come from or who they are or who they belong to, that's the, that's when they get confused and they think they want this world that they can't have, you know, and they think that having drugs is going to give them more confidence. It's gonna, they think that those drugs are going to deal with their trauma, you know. And you know, as coaches, when you're working with trauma, it is about listening to what they're saying and having a purposeful conversation. Because when I'm working with people who have generational trauma, and there's a lot, you know, when that have been traumatized by bullying and, you know, in schools, and, you know, when people say, oh, you're not Samoan because you can't speak Samoan. I mean, that is so common, you know, and what I say to that is, our culture is much more than just language. Language is a part of it. When you know your language, you know, okay, good, you can connect with people, but you can still connect with Samoans, even if it get it off Samoa. And I know, you know, with Tupua, Tuiatua, when he talks about that, he always says, don't ever apologize for not being able to speak your language. If you want to learn, go and learn, because you will have that essence of you know, when you're engaging. But if you don't ever apologize for it, you know. And the old man is writing a lot of things on mental health, you know. It's he's got a lot in his head that he's trying to put down, and I'm always trying to pick his brain when I go around there. But you know, he always goes back to knowing who you are and where you came from. And for us in coaching, I've talked to the old man about coaching. He said, he said, my mother was a coach, my father was a coach, and we think about our elderly back then. It's like they were counselors, but it's like they were wise, and they would look at you. And even if you think of how our Falisam was, you know, it's in a circle. We had group counseling before the Palangi put a name on it. You know, because then whoever's there will say, yeah, I saw a mate, yeah, you know, and it was. Everybody have a turn, even though it takes forever. You know how some people, you give them that space in 10, 20 minutes, or like 5, yeah. But we had group counseling. And when I'm coaching people, and even the youth, I'm thinking about cultural aspects. I'm looking at them as a young Samoan, you know, and your blood does not, you know, whether you have half blood or quarter blood, you know, that doesn't equate to how Samoan you are. it's in your soul, it's in your heart, and in your, and and that's what it is. And whenever I'm talking to people and they say, oh yeah, I'm like quarter Samoan, quarter this, quarter that, so I'm not really Samoan. Oh, I hate that. I say, but you are whatever you want to be, but your first name is Samoan, your last name is Samoan, or you're Samoan, you know. So and whether you have a Palangi name or think like that, it's what you know that you are. And these kids sometimes can get hung up on that. Whapea, oh, well, I don't understand the culture. But it's asking them, well, what do you understand of it? What do you understand of your culture? And what do you think makes you Samoan? And it's allowing them, it's having that purposeful conversation and coaching to allow them so that you understand, oh, okay, he's got self-esteem issues about who he is as a person, who he is as a Samoan, like this. And I think it very different i kukuwila because it's Americanized now, and it's and they like this high school, the high schools overseas and there, but it's about talking to them about their identity, and what does that look like, when people are asking, who are you and where did you come from? Those are that stops people. They're like, they have to actually think about it. And when we think about the culture of silence, we're always asking, how do you break that silence? It's like, just break it, just talk about it, just keep talking about it. When I here in New Zealand, I was at the mental health unit, and and they had a Filipino psychologist, and I would say to them, how come you got a Filipino psychologist? And because they said, Lavaya, Samoan, and I said, you don't actually need a psychologist. You just need someone who understands Samoan, our culture, to whamakala to these people why they are unwell. Because the psychologist, even if you translate it to her, she doesn't recognize the behavioral cues. She doesn't even when I walked in, I said to her, assessment. And she goes, why? And I said to the other one, because he's lying to you. And she said that I made a racist remark because I said to her, a Samoan knows when a Samoan is lying. I said, what's racist about that? and I said, you don't even know why he's lying to you. I do. And I'm going to ask him some questions. And then I'm going to bring my male colleague who's going to finish it. I said, because he's ashamed. And when what I know of the people that I've worked with, when they say, why are they suicidal? Why have they got suicidal thoughts? Why are they taking their life? It's shame. It's always shame. It's either because they have shamed the family or they want to shame the family. It's either revenge or avenge, And when they're trying to figure out all of these reasons why, they've got suicide, it's always about shame and pain. So I'm not sure what you're trying to diagnose, but I'm telling you right now, there's one reason why he tried to do that. And how do I know that? Because I'm Samoan or because I'm Pacific Islander. I don't pretend to know that the Tongans and the other races are the same. But those are the causal. These are the causal factors towards that. And it's like, how do we do the same with youth? How do we talk to their pain? Because they might say, well, that's what my mom, or that's how my dad, the words that they're saying to them. I mean, you know what the funny thing for me, when I first came and I was in Korti Samoa, they have this charge now. It's called lafongo upu, threatening words. When I heard those threatening words, I was thinking, oh my gosh, my mother used to say that to me all the time. And I was laughing. I thought, oh, okay, that's a charge now. But I think it made us more resilient, because it's like, okay, and you just got thick skin. But when I heard it in court, Oh, we were waka. I thought, oh, okay, that's a threat. I said, my mother would have been in court a million times if that was the case. Yes or no. So it's like I always think about growing up, and I mean, I come from a very strong line of women. I think my grandfather was the secretary to Ilimau, and so I have these cousins who are very strong, and we laugh about it because it's from our mothers and our grandmothers. And I said, that's probably why we're all working in social services, because they used to say to us, yeah, alofa i ka aka. Go and do the work, go and do this, and yeah, alofa. It's always about that. And it's like I said, oh my gosh, my mental health. But it's having those purposeful conversations and not thinking model, not looking at that person and saying they're broken, but looking at them as somebody who is creative and resourceful and whole rather than broken. Because when you look at them from a position of somebody that's whole, you actually work with them differently than somebody who's coming in with because a Gelo youth, when they come see me, they've already self-diagnosed themselves from Google, from Dr. Google. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, and so it's like changing the way you see them, thinking about how you grew up, and then because you actually have more knowledge than you realize a lot of the time about your own experiences, and how can you use your experiences to understand, not to fix what's going on with them, but to understand why they're being bullied, why they're feeling pain, why they are telling themselves, that why their self-talk is so negative. And so it's all of these are the things when you sit around with a group of coaches, and these are the things we're talking about, because you don't have to know anything about them when they walk in. You're just listening to their story and then picking out words from what they're saying and going deeper about it. When they say, I was feeling pain, it's like, okay, well, tell me about the pain. Tell me more. Tell me more. So it's really pushing the narrative back to them to talk about it. And these kids, sometimes they don't want to talk about things, they just shrug their shoulders. But when you're coaching them, it is saying, well, what else is going on? What do you want to talk about in this session? And it's really compacting it so they're talking about that one thing that's on top for them. And bullying seems to be a big part of that. Yeah. So I guess I haven't talked too much about the program of coaching, but I just wanted to give you examples of how we use coaching and how important it is to have this Indigenous type coaching for our Pacific people, because there's a lot of coaching programs out there, but this is their first one in the world. And it's important for us to embrace things that are Indigenous to our culture. Because when you're living in somewhere where you are amongst your culture, it's important for you to understand, how am I going to work with them, and how can I work with them as a coach and as a counselor. And that's what I love about this program. And I kind of jumped into this program by accident, because I just wanted to go and support my cousin, and I said, oh yeah, I'll come. But in my mind, I was thinking, what am I going to learn from that? Oh, I've been doing this for so long. What else is new? And then I was quite pleasantly surprised when I thought, oh, okay. So now when I'm working with my clients clinically, I decide in my first assessment with them whether they need coaching or whether they need therapy. Because often it's like, okay, when they come, it's like mountains of issues. But when you actually start to break that down in coaching, it's like, your focus is on the person, not the problem. Because a lot of them, when they come with all those problems, it's like most of them are out of their control. So your focus is on the person and not everything else going on around. That's why when my client was saying, her issues were langa ko'olua, her kids, her work or something, and then I was saying to, what about you? What's going on with you? Because when you tell somebody to be positive in a negative situation, it doesn't mean the situation is going to change, but it puts them in a better frame of mind to work with the issue. because you can't work with issues when you're emotional, you're emotionally charged, and I see that in Samoa, they make a lot of their decisions when they're the highest emotion, like whailunga or the, things like that. And it's how do you, for someone that's working with them, keep the focus on the person. And that's what coaching does. It's like they're going to come with all of this stuff, and most of it you can't control. And so it's really just saying, well, especially when the women come and their husband may, yeah, ma. I said, okay, well, we're not going to talk about your husband, but we'll talk about you, you know. And usually they get anxious. They go, oh, I said, it's not about blame, but it's like, how can we get you to be stronger and to be able to be more resilient and to be healthy-minded to deal with the situations around you? Because often when they come to me and say, oh, you know what? Well, it's like, it's how do you yourself manage your stress when fa'alawilawas come, because that's part of our culture anyway. And so it's really kind of that huge ball that they're bringing with you. It's really how do you shrink that down and actually focus on the person sitting in front of you, because when you strengthen that person, then they can go out and deal with the problems, knowing that these are the ones I can control and these are the ones that I can't control. And that's what I love about coaching. It's not like, for me, not focusing on what symptoms so I can get a diagnosis. It's about just having that conversation with a purpose with the person sitting in front of you, So yeah. And I guess at different stages, Mona and I, we can talk more about counseling. For me, coming in, it was really to support you in the work that you do, and talk about the coaching and how that can help you. Because for most of us, we've been doing this for a long time. Our issues are less weak. Same issues, same issues, and that silence is getting louder. But you know what? It's like you break that silence by talking about it. I mean, there's some people that they hate it when they, the big banners we got in Samoa with gender violence. When they show, and there's a lot of people that hate those signs. But it's it's there and it's been talked about, and there are people that, now that we've brought the whaiwhiaus into it, because they have their own role, and they're talking about it. And, we've done ads on TV where they've had the whaiwhiau, take part in the ads, And even one of them said to me, Moana, should I talk about alcohol and drugs? Seriously, you're going to lose your sheep. You just talk about faith and love and hope and, stay in your lane. Because I'm telling you, because, people typically, they will personalize and say, and, so it's knowing what lane you're in, stay in your lane. And I'm always saying to these people, no, you talk about faith and hope and love and everything else. That's we and leave that area to us. But it's important for them to understand, because we're using them, to support us, with domestic violence and to talk about it as well within their parishes. So, it's the silence is breaking. Even I can see that in Samoa, because there's a big push and very strong women's networks there. And we have the coaching has, started in Samoa. And I think now with the connection with our government, with yours and our prime ministers wanting us more to support the work being done, ikukuila, even if we're doing it remotely, because it's groups like these that support you in terms of peer supervision, so that you don't feel so isolated. Yeah. And so I think for me, it's really just to support you in the work that you do and have these forums so we can just thrash out, the issues that you're dealing with in your work, because it's important for us to look after our own mental health so that we're not having secondary trauma when we go home from the things that we're hearing or the things that we're seeing. And I'm always saying that to the counselors, Samoa, it's really important for them to have peer supervision, to not just to talk about your work, but just to be together, to go and eat and have some wine or whatever it is you do to talk. And we really push with the coaching because it was designed women, but we do have men. That sisterhood is really important. The women in business who've done other courses with this group, with the coaching and with the business side, I mean, we try to meet every month, just so that we can talk about, how's everyone doing, and how's your own mental health, so it's not just us looking after our clients and the people around us, Mona, with your diabetes, it is about you looking after yourself. And what are the things you do to look after yourself? You go for a walk, or you watch Netflix, or anything outside of that. And remember, we also have families. But it is important for you to connect with each other as well, and support of your work. And I can do that from here, or next time I come to Kukuila. And really try to strengthen the NGOs so that you're working collectively. Because, typically people are working within the constraints of their budgets, and so it's like, oh, we can't do this, we can't. But it is about working collectively, so that you're meeting and saying, this is what we've been doing. And this is because then whoever's funding you can see, you're going above and beyond. And typically people, when they see you doing the work on that minimum budget, they think, oh, okay, they can do it. They're all right, But it is when you are writing these proposals as coaches saying, actually, no, we need more money to do more training, because we can't handle everything that's coming to us. You have a community college there that need peer-to-peer mentors. And you have colleges there that need counselors and coaches. There's so much need there to address the areas of drug use, of unsafe sex, of unwanted pregnancies. There's so much work to do there, but there's only a few of us on the ground. And so these kind of forums, Mona, are good for support for you guys there in Kukuila.